Living Corporate is brought to you by Pfizer. Every day, Pfizer colleagues work across developed and emerging markets to advance wellness, prevention, treatments, and cures that challenge the most feared diseases of our time. For more than 170 years, Pfizer has worked to make a difference for all of those who rely on them. Learn more at Pfizer.com. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate, and Black History Month is over, y'all. Black History Month is officially over, but guess what? Black people are not just a fixture in time. We represent the entire potential and promise of America, right? We walk around every day, and in spite of white supremacist systems designed to exploit and harm us for the benefit of the majority, we're still here. I'm appreciative and just humbled by being able to be part of such an incredible community. There's so many points of evidence, things that we could look at over the last several hundred years while we should not even be here. Yet we're still not only alive, but we thrive. And so, I do hope for organizations that maybe started their Black History Month programming late or feel like they missed the boat on something, that they would still honor Black people in and outside of their workplaces, especially as we think about, Women's History Month. It's interesting too, there's been some comments around this. The brands that were very silent during Black History Month are very loud during Women's History Month, but surprise, surprise, women are also Black, So this is also, so for those of you who decided to try to sidestep Blackness by ignoring Black History Month, you have yet another opportunity to honor and recognize all Black women and brown women in the month of March. And so to not do that would be a mistake. Again, Black women, Black and brown women, and Black women specifically, are the reason why you're probably listening to this podcast in some way or another. They are the bedrock by which all of our technical, scientific, economic achievements have been built and made, either as by exploiting Black women or stealing from Black women, or in the very rare instances, allowing Black women to lead. We have the world that we have today. And so hopefully, if you're a brand listening to this, hopefully you take advantage of this season and honor Black women. It doesn't even have to be some huge grandiose gesture that you do for PR points. You could just, pay Black women equally. You could create some meaningful programs that give them resources and challenge some of the barriers and obstacles they face in your company every day. You could create new policies with your HR and legal teams so that you're not only attracting talent, but you're retaining it too, right? Like there's all types of things you could do to honor Black and brown women, and specifically Black women, even outside of Black History Month. I know it's wild, but it's true. Look, all that being said, I talked about, you could be a company that continues to celebrate Black history even outside of a federally mandated or designated, rather. Certainly isn't mandated. Federally designated month. And, a brand that comes to mind is Pfizer. Like, we continue to do an extended campaign with them, really picking up from last year. And I'm excited about this conversation I was able to have with Nathaniel Garcia. Look, Nathaniel is a brilliant brother. It was a phenomenal conversation. I mean, I really had to cut it short. Honestly, this interview and the next one you're going to hear, truly some of the firest content like we've had. Like, really excited about these interviews, excited about these discussions, excited about you not only hearing Nathaniel's story, but then hearing his perspective on like navigating this workplace, right? And I don't want anyone to like misconstrue, like the purpose of Living Corporate is to center and amplify historically marginalized voices. That is the point. And we do that through our podcasts. We do that through our web shows. We do that through our talk spaces on Twitter that are then turned into podcasts. We do that through our research content that we co-publish with Blind. You know, we do that through our blogging series. We do that through a multitude of channels, but understand that that is our mission. And I'm just, you know, I've been really thankful and excited about all the conversations we've had as a part of this Pfizer campaign, but these last few have been really, really special. And so my hope is that you listen, that you enjoy, and that's what you should be hearing. After you hear a few announcements from us, we'll be going right to that. Okay. I'll see you soon. Breast cancer is now the most commonly diagnosed cancer globally, but despite how common it is, it's often misunderstood. On the latest season of Science Will Win podcast, host Adam Rutherford and guests explore the journey of potential cancer treatments, the challenges, the human stories, the collaborations, and the breakthroughs. Tune in to this special 2-part series at how the innovative medications used to treat cancer come to be. Subscribe and listen to Pfizer's Science Will Win wherever you get your podcasts. Nathaniel, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Pretty good, Zach, my brother. I'm happy to be here with you.
Hey, man, I'm happy to be here with you as well. Look, let's talk about your journey. You've been here, you know, at Pfizer since 2018. You know, what drew you here? And I'm looking at your LinkedIn because, you know, I'm not a creep, but I just do my research. I
was going to say it's a little creepy. While I'm talking to you,
little creep.
Yeah.
Light creep. But what drew you here straight from college?
I got to be honest with you. I ended up at Pfizer by accident, Zach. I was working my way through school, picking up my BA in biology at Manhattan College, and I was doing the ambulance, right, as an EMT on the weekends and overnight shifts. And I got to be honest with you, you know, doing organic chemistry during the day and saving lives at night is not easy, right? I was suffering from burnout really bad, and I wasn't able to actually put some of the time that was necessary into my studies to be successful. Then one of my ambulance partners says, hey, you know, I do my overnights and some of the off hours at this place called Pfizer in Pearl River. They keep EMTs on their security staff just in case the scientists work late, that, you know, some health professionals are around in case of emergency, right? So I was like, that sounds like I would fit right in, right? So, you know, the security staff, they do a couple of tours overnight, but in between, you know, and on your lunch, it's nothing like what it would be in the ambulance, right? There's a lot more free time and it's a lot less urgency and a lot less stress, right? So I was like, I might be able to do some of that orgo studying while I'm actually at work over at Pfizer. Don't tell my old boss that though, right? And so, you know, I applied for that job. Luckily, I got it and started rubbing elbows and shoulders with scientists and figuring out what it is that Pfizer does here at Pearl River and what vaccine research and development is all about. And by the time I finished my bio degree, I kind of, you know, bumped into one of my colleagues in the hallway and said, hey, you know, I just got this brand new bio degree. You think I could use this here? And she was absolutely. You should apply to this link. We'll figure out a way to get you in. And lo and behold, a few weeks later, I was a full-time colleague, man.
Man, that sounds super, super dope. You know, like, it almost sounds like something like in a movie or something. So you were studying in college, but then you were also an EMT. You was riding the ambulances at nighttime?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So when I graduated high school, my educational journey is much more non-traditional than most students, right? Especially most students that you'll find in STEM. When I graduated high school, I was not excited about the premise of going to college, and I'd always promised to my family, you know, I'm going to go be a brain surgeon. This is what my thing was, right? That's I wanted to go into neurology and more specifically surgery, right? But when I graduated high school, I was schooled out, man. I was drained. And so when I got to college, I, you know, had been, you know, promoting and planning events for quite a while, and I was starting to make a little bit of money doing it. And I was able to convince my immigrant parents that, you know, this might be my future. I'm going to, you know, take a couple of years and figure out what it is I exactly want to do with my life. And in the meantime, I'll be able to make some money doing this event planning thing. And so I, you know, put a PowerPoint together and showed the scalability of the business to my parents. And my mom made me make a deal with her. She said, listen, it's 2006. by 2010, your classmates that you're graduating with now are going to be graduating college. If by that time you are not a millionaire the way you say you're going to be, you take your butt back to school. Go get that degree that you promised me you were going to get, right? I didn't struggle as an immigrant here so that you could throw parties for a living, her exact words, right? And so, along that journey, needless to say, I did not make $1 million. I went to go get that degree. But one of the most important things that happened on that journey is actually I lost my mother. And God rest her soul. One of the last things that she gave me was a bookmark. And this was right around 2010. I lost her in 2011. And on that bookmark was a quote. And on that quote, it said, "It is never too late to be what you might have been," by George Eliot, which was her saying, all right, you had your 4 years. You gave it your best shot. Go get that degree. Right. And after she passed, it was kind of like, I didn't have it. All of the accolades that I told her I was going to go get, right? I didn't have that paper. I didn't have that fulfillment. And so I used a little bit of money left from my business to go get my EMT, EKG, and phlebotomy certs, and kind of led me to the ambulance and my way here to Pfizer, like I said.
That's incredible, man. A couple things there. First of all, it sounds like you and your mother were very close. I relate to that. For me, growing up, it was mostly me and my mom too. Thankfully, I say as a privilege and gracious, I would say she's still here with me.
Oh, thank God.
But it also sounds, as based on what you're sharing, that I can't imagine the amount of resilience you've been able to build up mentally, as you just kind of navigate the space that you navigate. We're going to get to it too. Parallel to all of this work that you're talking about that you've been doing at Pfizer and again, pre-Pfizer's EMT, you've been really engaged in the education space. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, my mom, again, I'm going to talk about my mom a lot here. One of the things she always instilled in me is that, by virtue of your privilege, you are going to be the first to walk through many doors in your life. Your responsibility, being the first, is to make sure that door stays open for folks to follow you. Folks that look like you, folks that share your life experiences, folks that come from the neighborhood that you came from. And so education, it's the most natural way to give back, right? So I spent a lot of my time in college tutoring for the biology department. Even when I graduated, right, I spent a lot of time tutoring standardized tests for kids that came from neighborhoods like the one I grew up in the Northeast Bronx, right? Ones that don't necessarily have the opportunity to receive services like that. And, these tests are not necessarily designed for us to do well. And so I like to do my part in bridging that gap, and education and mentorship and the like. That's just, me fulfilling my obligations to folks that share similar experiences.
Well, no, you say a lot there, right? In that you see yourself, you said obligated. The reality is man, my challenge, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. I ask you about your time, about your background, how you show up, but it sounds as if, not even sounds as if you're saying you see yourself as having a shared responsibility for providing and supporting accessibility and equitable experience and opportunity for other folks that look like you. And it's wild, Nathaniel, because I don't know, man, if that's like a collective consciousness that we have amongst Black and brown people. We're recording this during Black History Month, right? And a theme when you think about Black History Month and just the people that we really venerate is that they all have this shared sense of community. They're not that individualism thing and that just, and kind of glorifying selfishness. That's not really, that doesn't really vibe, right? Historically with the people that we venerate. So where would you say that you got that mentality from your mother also?
I came from a family that was really supportive of me, right? And really early on, I was able to recognize that all of my successes and achievements are not a direct result of my efforts alone, right? Without being propped up by my family and my support networks along the way, friends and the like, I wouldn't be here, man. You know what I mean? And it took quite a few people to have vested interest in my success, even when I couldn't see it for myself, in order for me to get to where I am. And so I think it's a really important thing. You know what I mean? And I think, the perspective, and I don't quote rappers often, right? But Jay-Z said once, they look at us like crabs in a barrel. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But nobody recognizes that crabs are not supposed to be in a barrel. And if crabs work together, they'd be able to get out of that barrel, right? But first you have to recognize that you're in one. And so I'm fortunate enough to, you know, be able to pick my head up and look around and see that barrel and understand that if we work together, right, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
This barrel cannot contain us.
1,000%, man. You're right. But like to your point is community. And you're right. Like there's a need to address like the premise, right? First of all, crabs their natural habitat is not a barrel. So it's to have the empathy and grace to acknowledge, okay, the system is not natural for these crabs as we extend the metaphor. And dually or simultaneously, we can hold that, you know, collaboration and a communal mindset really supports and drives liberation. So I agree with you 100%. Yeah. You know, let's talk a little bit more. Again, you've talked about your family a little bit. You talk about the fact that, you know, you're the child of immigrants. You know, what role does your upbringing and background play in how you show up at Pfizer and in your educational efforts?
That's a very interesting question. I'll tell you, it plays a much more significant role for me now than it ever has. Now that I'm an adult, now that I have the privilege of being a leader in this space, showing up as my authentic self is really, really paramount for me, right? That's first and foremost. If I can't be me, then I can't be here. So it's really nice to have that support from the collective organization, right? And for folks to see in me what I see in me, and then even beyond. But for me, my folks, and, you know, I'm not sure if you're from an immigrant background, right? I guess all of us are if we're Americans in some way, shape, or form. But
sure,
that struggle, right? That struggle, and seeing my mom and my dad and my grandparents, more specifically, work to get everything that they have, right? And I don't mean work 9 to 5. I mean multiple jobs. I mean
work,
nurses, work, right? Like things that I would never sign up to do. Right. And maybe that's my privilege, right? But they set the bar here. And so it's my job, right, as the next generation to bring that level up. And then for the next generation to bring that level up. And so I think the work ethic is primary. I think the morals are primary. And I think that those experiences, I can't put enough credit to them.
Yeah. You know, you say, so you're right. So like I'm Black American. And so yes, we're all, immigrants by choice or by not, into this country. But yeah, you know, even still, you know, my people came, my whole family's from Mississippi. Yeah. So both sides of my family were sharecroppers. They picked cotton. My grandparents, both sets of my grandfathers, they didn't finish school. They didn't finish elementary or middle school.
Right.
And so, you know, they would take me back like to my great grandmother's house, and I would talk to my great grandmother, and I was blessed and fortunate enough to be able to meet my great great grandmother, right, and talk to her about her grandmother who was a slave, and talk about, you know, the fact that, hey, and like they showed me like the fields, hey, this is where we used to work, like, and not my great grand, I'm talking about my grandparents, right? Mm-hmm. They tell me about like, yo, like I remember when I had to do all these things. Then looking at my mother, who was an educator, but then also had part-time jobs at Home Depot and Walmart and Target, right? So she was a full-time teacher teaching English in high school, and then also somehow was able to work, you know, like some part-time retail job just for us to you know, for us to get what we needed. And I'm not that person to be like, I didn't have dirt floors, right? We had power. I knew I had food, every day, you know, but at the same time, I looked around, I was like, okay, I got to a certain age. And then she would also be honest with me, like, look, we don't make a lot of money. I can't do blah, 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 blah. Like we would have those conversations. And so I think it's, you know, it's important for us. And I say us, I'm talking about like just the diaspora. Like, you know, it's to just continue to remember, like, to your point of like, okay, they gave us this. We're now privileged to do X, Y, and Z. And I hear you. And that goes into morals and heart, just doing right by people, doing right by yourself, working hard. You know, even as working hard might be out of phase, even if you're not going to necessarily break your back it's not about breaking your back for a brand. It's about like working hard for your last name and your, like like you said it, like, yo,
the legacy
here, laddering up. It's the legacy thing, right? So what you're doing, you're invested in yourself.
Of course. And I'd be remiss if we didn't take a time out to give a shout out to all of the ancestors and predecessors, especially the moms that just made it work. However many jobs, you still came home, you still had food, you still got woken up in the morning, you still got taken to school. You know what I mean? So, I think that's the backbone. That's where it starts, right? From very humble beginnings in Jamaica. And you mentioned going back to Mississippi to see how your grandparents and great grandparents used to live. I could not believe the conditions that my mother grew up in when I went to visit in Jamaica. Right? Like you're talking about bathrooms outside, no running water, no power, cooking on hot rocks. Yeah. Right? Like, you know what I mean?
Man. And that's it humbles you so much. Right. And you talk about like all these systems, you talk and like just the impacts of imperialism, colonialism, and like, but then also just like, okay, then zooming back to you, it's like, okay, you're here now. Like you have this opportunity. This is where your people came from. Here's all the things they did. If they didn't do all that work, then you wouldn't even be here. So what are you going to do now with that opportunity? So to that end, right? Like, let's talk about, let's pivot a little bit to Pfizer. You're a millennial. I think like we're roughly the same age. Most of us millennials are not trying to stay in no job long, right? Like, you know, I listen, Nathaniel, I'm gonna tell you something.
We're a little better than the Gen Zers by a smidge.
Look, hey, let's be very clear. Them Gen Zers look around 2 weeks, be like, hey, this ain't really the vibe. The I'm out. I'm gone, right? They was talking about us millennials, but they weren't ready. So, but here's the thing. You're absolutely right. Like, we're not as bad as Gen Zers, and it's gonna be a curious experience. It's curious to see what that progresses to. It looks like in the next 5 to 7 years. And I'll say this is for me, like, I'm the job hopper that everybody talks about, right? I'll be in roles 2-3 years and I'm gone. Now I'm over here. My current role, I finally figured out a place that I believe I'm gonna be at for a while, right? But it took a second, right? It's, you know, it checks a lot of really unique boxes.
Right.
I think that for us to, you know, really have a role and for us to stay and be somewhere long term, it has to check some unique boxes. Like for me, I was looking for, okay, is the leadership black? Is it a majority black or brown company? Will I be empowered to really lead and grow the business? Am I respected? Am I heard? Am I sponsored? You know, it was like a lot of things that I needed from my experience shaped by past traumas in corporate spaces. And so I'm curious for you. I'm confident. I've talked to several other people in my generational cohort. That is not unique. Like everyone has their own check boxes that they need satisfied. I'm curious, like what has kept you at Pfizer and what do you project or predict will keep you at Pfizer?
So for me, I think it starts with my preparation to get into medical school, right? So you mentioned falling in love with the space that you're in, right? In order to be an attractive candidate for med school, you have to do a certain amount of clinical hours, which I got from the EMT work, right? Patient care. And then in addition to that, you have to do a certain amount of research, right? So I was fortunate enough to land a research opportunity at Weill Cornell Medical College. And when I got there, Zach, I sucked. I stunk it up in the lab, man. I was knocking stuff over. My gels were coming out real bad, streaky. Like it was really bad, right? My cells were dying on the first pass. But you know, as we're taught, you got to be twice as good. So being half as good is certainly not acceptable. And so I kind of put my nose to the grinding stone and worked on my skills. And by the end of that summer, I was a pretty solid technique-wise scientist, right? And I had really fallen in love with the laboratory. I didn't have that love when I got there, but by the time I left, I was really endeared to the bench. And so it kind of was a natural progression, right? It was a really organic relationship for me to transition from an EMT on the security staff into a laboratory scientist at Pfizer. The other thing is, for example, I got a chance to work on the COVID vaccine. But when I got here at Pfizer, right, being a scientist was not a sexy job, right? Now scientists are getting a lot of credit, right? We got some clout now. But it was not the case when I got here. And at that time, our blockbuster vaccine was one of the best selling vaccines of all time. But I bumped into a sign in the hallway one day that said 1 billion doses given. And now we know, 4.5 years removed, that we have over upwards of 4 billion doses of our COVID vaccine, right? I could live to be 200 years old as a brain surgeon and not hit 1 billion patients. So when you talk about impact, right, and that's not to take anything away from the folks on the front line. They have guts for stuff that I don't have anymore. Right. But impact on global health. When I tell you that I was on the team that designed the clinical assays that got COVID from conception to market, right? And now 4 billion people have been affected by something that I worked on. That's global impact. So for me, that's when I knew that I can make myself a home here. In addition to that, the network, right? Now, I will tell you this. It is not a majority Black and brown company. That is not the case. I will never begin to fix my lips to say that. But the folks that are here do a tremendous job at building a network and building a community and making sure, like I said, that door stays open.
Recently to that point, right? Like recently Pfizer had a panel for their interns featuring some prominent Black leadership at Pfizer, including Sherry Cassano, who we just had on just a couple weeks ago.
Sherry's great.
I'm curious. Yeah, she's great. I'm curious, like, what your experience has been looking for mentors and sponsors, and what advice you have for Black folks in leadership positions to lift as they climb.
So that's a very good question. Let me say this. I've had an awesome experience, right? I think that as long as you're putting your best foot forward, generally people are going to recognize that. And people that look like you and have similar backgrounds and kind of can see themselves in you are always going to look out, right? I will say that we do need more Black and brown faces in leadership, and we're working towards that, right? Albert made equity one of our core values. And so we're very deliberate about increasing numbers in those spaces. But mentorship for me has been tremendous. You're always going to deal with certain situations as a person of color, whether it be microaggressions or whether it be, feeling othered or being one of few in the room, right? Or being credentialed when you walk into a room because you don't look like most of the folks there. But I'll say that my mentors do an excellent job at identifying ways for me to be a more productive leader, right? And for me to amplify my voice in certain spaces. So it's going to depend on the relationships that you're building for sure. But I'll say that our Black leaders will always make time for us. All you got to do is reach out. If you have a question, and it might not be same day, right? These folks are very busy, but you will absolutely be able to get some time on the calendar. It may be a month from now, but it's on you then to make sure that time counts for something. You got to make sure that you're getting the most out of the FaceTime that you have with these leaders. I think they do a tremendous job at lifting as they rise. Obviously there's some work to go. We got some work to do in terms of building our numbers and creating a community that is self-sufficient. But our leaders are really incredible, man. And they're pushing the needle farther and faster than a lot of places that like our neighboring companies.
There's something about like we've had some other folks on as part of, our extended series with Pfizer. And for me, and we've talked about like experiences of you see somebody that looks like you and you want to engage them, right? Like, oh, can you help me with this? Or cause you look at them, you're like, yo, I really want to be like that.
Yeah.
Right. Or you look at their profile and you find out, oh man, because depending on where you're sitting at where stage of your career, you're like, I can't even imagine how they did that. Right. And so you want to engage them, and then you reach out and they don't reciprocate, or they aren't as advertised. Like, I'm curious, like if you ever had any of those types of experiences at Pfizer or not, but just, and like what it looks like for you to manage the disappointment there, and then how you bounce back from that.
Yeah. So I'll say that I haven't had too many of those experiences, but I'm not unfamiliar with it. I don't find those experiences to be necessarily with people that look like us, but just people that are in positions that I find interesting, right? And when I get to, the first thing is I can acknowledge that when I was a little bit more junior in my career, and I've only been here for 5 years or so, 4.5 years, but in the first year or so, I was really excited to meet and engage with everybody that I could, right? And in a sense to get just a general knowledge about what it took, what the experiences were. But as a result, I wasn't focused in what my ask was. Right. And so if you don't get what you're looking for, you got to look at what you're asking for. That's number one. If you're really focused in what it is that you're seeking from somebody, it's a lot easier for them to engage with you and to give you what it is that you're looking for. Right. And the other thing is you have to allow folks the space to be human. Right. It could have just been a bad day. Could have been a bad week. It could have been some personal issues going on. Right. It could be that we're all very, very busy. We work to our level here at Pfizer. There's nobody here that's skating. Right. And so if folks are making that time, it's on you, right? Especially as the junior colleague or somebody that's seeking something, to be very deliberate about what you're asking and make sure you're asking the right person.
Real talk. So, it's funny because you talked directly to it and about it. There's a theme in some of your advice here around just being accountable and being and owning the opportunity that you have, right? Like, like one thing. And I have so much, like we've talked so many times on Living Corporate about mentorship and sponsorship, and selfishly, because that's really where I've always sought support, right? In my early career. And it's of course now, but I'm blessed and really privileged now to have some incredible mentors, both, at my current place of employment, Diversity Inc. And then also, outside of that. But, when you think about like, okay, you are a junior person, especially for me. I didn't have any kids. I wasn't when I wasn't married. You have way more time than you really appreciate that you do. You're engaging folks who are like senior executives, and they might have they have all kinds of stuff going on that you may not appreciate right then. Right. So when you meet with them, right? Because I've been on both sides, right? So yes. Well, they come to you and they might not be they might not have the chippiest disposition, but they're tired. Like to your point about them being human beings, like they're exhausted, man. They have pressures from all these people, both in their organizational matrix and on side of it. Yeah. Then they sit down with you. The worst thing you can do is not have some prepared questions, documented, and show a willingness to take notes. And listen.
That's the point, right? Right.
Right. When you sit down, you're like, yo, what's your favorite color? Or like, what do you typically, it's like, yo, what am I doing?
Why am I here?
I carved out why am I here? I carved out 30 minutes for you in a day that you have no idea. I declined something. Right. I prioritized this meeting. I know it was 2 weeks or a month later, but I'm telling you. And so, we don't do, we being Black and brown, being younger professionals, the generals we want to use, we don't do ourselves favors when we don't show up. Right. Research, do your homework. What do you know about their profile? Like, what are you really seeking to understand? Yeah. Are you just looking to just like be around them? Like, which is not shameful in no way, but again, if you're going to ask for their time,
that's the thing, right? And you also have to be cognizant that folks that look like us and that have made it to that position have given a lot of themselves already to get there. They already have mentees, right? You won't be there first. That's for sure, right? They're already doing a service, right? And so we tend to give a lot more of ourselves to each other than some other places or other backgrounds do, right? Because there just aren't as many of us. So while, senior leaders that might not be of our persuasion have 2 or 3 mentees, we got 15. Right. And so.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
And it's like, there's way more. So to your point, it's like, here's, you said something and I don't think you meant it this way, but it hit something in me. So I wanted to say it is, there's something about typically people that look like us by just the nature of corporate America and just America as an entity. I'm going to use the word is, there's so much trauma that most Black and brown folks, it's Black History Month we're talking about, but just members of the diaspora have to submit themselves to or push through or get therapy through or whatever the case is, that by the time they get that VP title or that, like, a lot of them are tired. Like, they're legitimately burnt out, right? Like, and they're carrying more than you may appreciate, right? And I say that now again, I'm not some whatever in terms of, I'm not 50 something years old, but I accelerated through, junior talent to, mid-level, to manager or functional team leader to mid-level manager to now being like a true executive. And it's like, and I can say even in my like compressed time of a decade that, like if I was to take this and I add another decade to this, I'm probably going to look a little bit different, right? I'm probably going to, my capacity for certain things or my patience for certain things are probably going to be a little bit thinner, that my triggers are going to be higher just by the nature of wear and tear of navigating in these spaces. And so like, I think that's important to keep in mind, right? As you just, in terms of just empathizing with people and the whole humanity point you're talking to.
Yeah, no. And I think you're 100% right, man. You're speaking to it. Right. And, it's again, you have to allow people the space to be people, right? You never know what's going on with somebody, but you can almost be guaranteed that if you're talking to a senior leader and they're of color, their plate is full. They probably got seconds. They probably working a second shift, right? They got one job, but they're working 2 shifts because like my mom always told me, my dad always told me, twice as good. Some people could show up and not have their shirt ironed, right? Some people could show up and not have the line up. You don't have that luxury, right?
It's facts. No, it's facts. And another way it shows up is in the burden to show your work, right? So like, I've been in certain situations. Like I come from, I was in consulting for a while, right? So you think of like Big Four, Accenture, et cetera, et cetera. So there are some people I've seen who can walk into a room and they'll have an idea or they want to have a meeting and they just show up like no presentation. They might have a marker and a whiteboard and they up there and it's a show, right? But then like, we can't do that. We can't just show up with no agenda, no pre-read materials, no
preparation,
preparation, overly articulated strategy, all of the things to validate your voice or validate your mind. Like, that work, even that work, and it doesn't stop as you elevate.
Nope.
That is mentally like, that will fry you, right?
Yeah.
And so to your point, like, it shows up in different ways. Look, we could keep on going. This conversation is fire. Look, we keep on talking about black, but you talked about being, being a child of immigrants. Talk a little bit more about that. My impression looking at your last name is that you're Afro-Latinx.
Yeah. So my mother, I mentioned, was born and raised in Jamaica. My father is Puerto Rican and Honduran, right? And so, I grew up in the Bronx, in the primarily Jamaican side of the Bronx on the Northeast, but obviously very, very heavy Hispanic influences there, right? Part of it, I don't speak Spanish, right? And let me start there with my Afro-Latinx experience. I don't speak Spanish, right? But I do have the last name. And I can't tell you how many folks I've disappointed when they see my last name and see how I present. And they go to speak to me in Spanish, and it's like, I'm sorry, man. Like, right? I got the Rosetta Stone. I'm working on it, but I'm not quite there yet. But that's a direct result of being othered, as my father was raised in the United States, right? So when he grew up in the 70s and early 80s, being Puerto Rican or being Hispanic was not it wasn't cool, right? Like, you know what I mean? There were obvious persecutions for folks that were other in these neighborhoods, right? You got to think that these were majority white neighborhoods in the Bronx when we grew up, when my father grew up, right? And so the Puerto Ricans on the block were the outsiders that were coming to take over the neighborhood. They were very proud and very loud and very present, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, really easy to get othered in that sense. But as a result, folks that weren't as amenable to change, pushed back against that. So my father didn't spend a lot of his life speaking Spanish. So his is pretty broken, right? And my mother was very, very big in education. So I was able to speak and read and write at a level higher than my age when I was younger. As a result, I think my father felt a little bit of intimidation there. If I don't speak good enough Spanish to keep up with his English, I don't want folks to judge him based off of what it is that I'm giving him. So I never really got the Spanish, right? He didn't take the time to teach me broken Spanish because it wouldn't have been necessarily a benefit. And then when I got to school and I tried to take Spanish, they said, your last name's Garcia. You can't take this class. I said, but I really don't know Spanish, man. I really don't know it, right? And they say, oh, well, you're better off in the French class. So I spent 6 years studying French from 7th to 12th grade. And by the time I got to college, I took a year or two here or there. But if you don't use it, you know what I mean? You lose it.
You gonna lose it.
Quick.
So this is interesting, right? Because, I talk about like my experience as a Black American, again, family, deep roots in the South. You're talking about a Black experience, Black and Latinx experience, like more so like, again, in New York, in the Bronx. Talk to me. I'd just love to hear your perspective on intersectionality, like the intersectionality and the diversity of like just the diaspora, and ways that you've seen, or ways that you believe that really like that we can all, especially as we think in this context of Black History Month, we can be more collaborative and work together, both in the corporate spaces and out of.
Yeah. So I live that intersectionality, right? Most corporate places have employee resource groups. At Pfizer, we call them colleague resource groups. I am at Pearl River for my site, the co-lead of the global Black community, right? Now, for the contiguous United States, and I even believe in a few sites in South America, they also have a Latin group, right? The Pfizer Latin community. I'm on the enterprise level for the Pfizer Latin community. So the overarching organization that coordinates all of the specific sites and their chapters. My impact at that level, right, and as a part of the Be Them pillar, has been some of the proudest stuff that, and I've only been there for a month, but I know that the work that we're doing and the things that we're working on are going to have profound impacts in our community, and not necessarily Pfizer branded, right, but just making sure that what we're doing reaches folks that need it the most. And and COVID is obviously the most recent example. The health disparities that were highlighted throughout the pandemic are things that I'm really passionate about, right? And so living that and breathing that and building bridges and making sure that the therapies and the breakthroughs that we're generating on a daily basis almost around here make it to communities like the one I grew up in is something that I'm really prideful about. The other thing that I would be remiss to leave out is if one of us wins, we all should be winning, right?
Right.
And it's not enough for us to take a step in one direction without making sure everybody can come along. So once we understand that we all have more in common, and I think we're coming to this realization now, right? Which is maybe why equity is a core pillar of what Pfizer is about, right? A core value rather. We can move together, and we are stronger together. We will have a lot more progress together, right? It becomes easier when we all lift together, right? And so that intersectionality is one that I like because I get to be the bridge. I get to have one foot in and one foot in. And then I get to bring both of those resources together to push our initiatives forward because, the Latin group will do work in the Latin community. The Black group will do work in the Black community. But we live together. This is the same community. It might be 2 streets apart, but we're doing the same things here, guys. Right. And so if we do it together and bring both of those communities together, you could have one event with 100 people and another event with 100 people. Let's get 200 together, right? And then those 200 will have now greater resources and networking experiences based off just more people being in the room, right? More shared experiences.
There's so much to be said about, like you said, like we're doing the same things, like, and we're together, like we're a street over, but we're still together, right? Like, I think like somewhere along, and again, like, Bell Hooks and others have written about this and speak about it much more eloquently than I. But like you think of just historically, somewhere around like that civil rights era and post that, like, we started seeing like this pivot from community to like just individualized kind of like, okay, let me make sure I protect me and mine, right? But like in pursuit of acceptance from white spaces or getting a bag or whatever the case may be. But like I think we can look over the past 50 years and say, look, man, like when we are able to actually collaborate and build together, we can actually make an impact. I think like this idea of like this like individualized Messiah thing, that's not really what's going to move the needle. We have to come together.
Right. And we could look at examples from other communities that do it really, really well. Right. Even if we were just to focus on one thing, maybe not healthcare, maybe just community economics, right? Maybe just education in our communities. We have the examples, right? The blueprint is there, right? We're watching teams win championships, and we're on the sidelines arguing about why we can't make the playoffs.
Right. Why you get more minutes than me? I should be coming off the pick.
Come on, man.
Like let's go. Look now. We're talking about health equity a lot these days as it just continues to be relevant in this world that we engage. You know, what role have you played to create a more equitable, accessible world for Black and Brown communities, and what are you most proud of?
Oh man, that's a tough question. That's a tough question. So the role that I play, and I've always been the first one to say this, I am a very small piece of the puzzle, right? Or one small cog in a very giant machine that is Pfizer. What I will say is this machine, I think historically, and maybe most pharmaceutical companies get the same kind of rap, was driven by dollars and revenue. And to a certain extent, that's always going to be the bottom line for a lot of these companies. But when you take the step to make equity a core value, and you take the step to make sure that your clinical trials are diversified and representative of the populations that you're looking to serve, that is what the change needs to be, right? You need more Black and Brown faces and voices in the room and share different cultural experiences. That's always helpful. Diversity is what drives innovation, right? That will always be the case. It has to come from a new idea. And those new ideas often come from people that are from different spaces. You know what I mean? But I think that, so obviously I'm very proud of my work on the community vaccine, the COVID-19 vaccine. But I don't know if that's what I'm most proud of. So my work with GBC at the Pearl River site, the other day we're working with an organization called Cool Nerd Connect. And I kind of mentioned to you that I ended up being a scientist by accident. I was on my way to medical school. Right. And I didn't come from a family that had the privilege of knowing Black and Brown scientists. So when you think of scientists, you think of Albert Einstein, right? Older white gentleman. Mm-hmm. You don't think of a white woman. You don't think of any women. You don't think of people of color. Right. Mm-hmm. Wasn't even on my list of things that I could possibly be. Right. The other day we were working with this company that works on career awareness, Cool Nerd Connect, as I mentioned. And we were able to bring 30 students from Mount Vernon High School to my site to come see where the COVID vaccine was developed and to come see a group of Black and Brown scientists, a group of Black and Brown leaders that see themselves in those students, right? And are able to generate and build experiences for them to make sure that they're just even aware of the possibilities that are before them. And so when I think about my legacy and what it is I'm trying to build, yes, I'm tremendously grateful for my gifts and my skills in the lab and the contributions I've been able to make to the science of the business, right? But when I think about the path that we're laying to move forward, that's what drives me. That's what gets me up in the morning and excited to get here because I have more programs to bring. I have more enrichment to bring to my colleagues. I have more perspectives to bring to my colleagues. And in addition, that work is being done outside of these walls, right? So when I get a kid to come here and when he gets here or when they get there, they're looking around like, what is this place? And by the time they leave, they're excited and thinking about a career as a vaccine scientist. That's pride for me.
I love that, man. Look, I'm going to be honest. This is probably the fierest interview we've had as a part of this series. And I say that respectfully to everybody at Pfizer.
I appreciate you, Zach. So what are you doing next week, man?
Super fire.
We could do this. What you doing tomorrow?
Hey, don't play. You talk to Ellen, talk to Erica. It's nothing now. We can.
That's too funny, man.
Hey, man. Look, before we let you go, any parting words or shout outs?
Yeah, man, a ton. I have an incredible network, man. I have incredible mentors. They know who they are. Far too many for me to list. and a couple of colleagues that stand to my right and my left that really make it possible for me to do what it is that I do here, right? Both in and outside of the lab. My manager is incredible. He's really good at making sure that, you know, he develops weaknesses and highlights folks for their strengths and puts us in position to win quite often. My leadership team at Pearl River GBC, we wouldn't be able to bring these programs and this enrichment to our colleagues and outside of our walls the way we do without your help. So thank you. Dr. Simpkins is our executive sponsor. She's the best. And I want to thank my family, man. It's been an incredible journey, and they've been with me 100%, right? Like if I didn't have somebody to co-sign on my loans, I wouldn't have this degree. I wouldn't be in these walls. I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing, right? So I didn't have that privilege to be able to go with a loan, and I didn't have to, thankfully. Yeah. And I also want to thank you and the folks that were able to put this together. This has been really quite the experience, man. And maybe at some point, if you need a co-host, I got you. Just call my people. My people will call your people. Right. You know,
We'll make it happen. No, look, don't threaten me with a good time. Nathaniel, it's been a pleasure and a privilege to sit down with you. You're a friend of the show. We look forward to having you back, man.
Zach, my brother, I appreciate you, man. Just keep doing the good work.
Yes, sir. Same to you, man. Peace. And we are back. Yo, I want to thank Nathaniel again. Shout out to all the black folks. And look, the diaspora, we talked about this in the conversation, but first generation, second generation, fifth generation, Afro-Latinx, you know, those all around the world. Shout out to all the black folks. Shout out to black and brown people across the world. Our stories and our journeys are much more connected and interdependent than a lot of us care to admit or are comfortable embracing. But I'm just really appreciative of the conversation. Make sure you want to learn more about Nathaniel. You want to learn more about the work that he's doing and supporting at Pfizer. Click the links in the show notes. Till next time, I love y'all. Take care of yourselves. Peace.
Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.